And this is what Zurich, Switzerland looks like today. The taxi drivers in Vienna may not be African, but they're not exactly Austrian either. And this is obviously a monument to the Soviet troops who liberated Austria from the Nazis in 1945. There on the shield, you see the infamous hammer and sickle. And it's interesting that so many people in continental Europe still view the communists as liberators. And here you see a Holocaust memorial in the middle of Vienna. Just an ugly, gloomy presence interrupting an otherwise beautiful and classic city. And here you see this side of the Holocaust memorial is a bit more horrific. Now, what is the purpose of putting a piece of grotesque so-called art in the middle of a city in a busy area where everybody who walks by has to look and see the hideous nature of what this particular monument depicts, where children are forced to view these contorted bodies and these grisly scenes of morbid remembrance of horrors from decades ago. The purpose is exactly what it appears to be. It's to make people feel bad, and specifically to induce in them a sense of guilt. Guilt is a powerful weapon in the war on freedom. I mean, think about it. When somebody's trying to make you feel bad, feel guilty about something, they're trying to put you in a position where they can extract some sort of concessions from you. So these morbid monuments serve to remind us in a visceral way why we don't deserve true freedom of speech and expression and association as individuals, and why as nations we can't be entitled to self-determination. More than 60 million people died in World War II, many of whom were civilians, many of whom were conscripts, and perhaps 10% of whom were Jewish. It was a war like no other, filled with more atrocities and more displays of inhumanity than any other. Austria lost 385,000 people, nearly 6% of its total population, in World War II. Included among these victims were about 65,000 Jews. Their deaths should be honored in a dignified way, not exploited for shock value in the furtherance of ideological ends. Most people don't memorialize their deceased loved ones by obsessively showcasing their suffering with explicit renderings of it. Most nations don't memorialize their fallen soldiers in that way either. But the Holocaust Memorial in Vienna has other objectives besides honoring the dead. It seeks to serve as a disruption in the very heart of a city filled with beauty and with inspiring monuments to great achievers. Vienna's grisly so-called memorial to Jewish victims serves to help undermine Austria's national self-esteem. It serves to induce in the Austrian people a more cynical, a more submissive mindset that is less attuned to the moral imperative of self-defense. Only a jaded or morally weakened citizen would stand by and watch passively as his homeland was invaded by hostile foreigners. That's what's happening in slow motion throughout much of Europe as third world populations march in, take root, and in time overwhelm the dwindling populations of European whites.